Sean Luther, Spiritual Awakenings International Advisory Board Member and SAI affiliated group leader of Hawaiian Islands. I am so excited to be here today, our 5th year in a row, right, Yvonne? So excited to be with you all and to be hosting the Researching Spiritually Transformative Experiences panel. We have some amazing speakers tonight sharing the latest in cutting edge research and information in spiritually transformative experiences. Today, we're going to be hearing from Dr. Jeffrey Long, overall, John Stone and Ronald Meyer, and Jianing Wang and Rev Kevin Lee. Our first speaker tonight will be Dr. Jeffrey Overall, PhD, who is a professor of conscious economics and entrepreneurship. He studies the link between consciousness and mental health, optimum performance, increased productivity, sustainability, business ethics, financial performance, wakefulness, and spirituality. Dr. Overall will be discussing his study on confusion and integration challenges in Kundalini Awakenings. Welcome, Dr. Overall. Glad to have you here tonight.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to be speaking to you today about a research project that I completed not too long ago on confusion and integration challenges involving Kundalini Awakenings and its insights from a qualitative comparative analysis that I did. So my intentions for this talk is to provide greater clarity on Kundalini Awakenings, explore some of the challenges that can occur to people that are encountering these types of awakenings, and discuss what hinders and helps the integration. And hopefully my talk can help build on what was discussed earlier today in relation to Kundalini Awakenings. So a Kundalini Awakening is essentially energy that's dormant and rises up the spine. It can be an extremely blissful experience, and it can cause spiritual, emotional, physical shifts. It's described in the ancient yoga and Hindu texts. It is seen as a transformative and also at times, or an overwhelming experience. It is unique from other spiritual awakenings. There are different types of awakenings, like kenshos that I spoke about last year, that don't necessarily involve any type of energetic rising like Kundalini awakenings do. So they're definitely distinct. And the reason that I'm interested in studying Kundalini awakenings, other than the fact that I've had one and wanted to understand what occurred to me, but there's a rise in reported of these types of experiences across the planet, as we've talked about today, and they're often misdiagnosed in Western medical contexts. There's few empirical studies on them. There are some, but not many, and hope that there'll be more and more emerging over time. And there's a real need to identify some really capable and helpful coping mechanisms for individuals that are navigating this challenging, beautiful process. So some of the common challenges that people experience with Kundalini awakening is there's confusion. People just ultimately don't know what's happening. It can cause an ontological crisis where their previous version of reality has completely shifted to something that they've never experienced before. And there's a real challenge and difficulty in integrating that experience into their life, or what appears to be life now afterwards. They can experience some isolation from people that they were close to and probably still are, that don't understand what they're experiencing because they don't understand it themselves. It can be emotional and also physically distressful. So I wanted to understand, for the purpose of the study, was what are the confusion and integration problems that people experience through this life-changing experience? And I wanted to identify what are some of the things that can help or hinder the process. And what I used was participant stories and patterns to get a sense of what was occurring for people as they went through this particular process. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about what a qualitative comparative analysis is, other than that it is a type of test. It's a methodology that really blends qualitative interview type data with quantitative study that can be done on small sample sizes to really get a sense of what are some of the contributing factors to the two outcome variables that I had, so confusion and integration. So it can really help to understand some of the hows and why experiences change or differ from one person to another. So for this particular study, it involved 19 people who self-declared having a Kundalini experience. They were recruited from an online support community, and they answered six open-ended questions. No personal data was collected, so no personal identifiable information was collected from this cohort of Kundalini experiencers. So there was six key variables that I studied. The intensity of the dark night of the soul experience, the length of the dark night of the soul experience, confusion after the awakening, difficulty with integrating that, the types of spiritual practices that people engaged with, and what their level of community involvement entailed. So, just to talk a little bit about the Dark Night of the Soul, I know this was spoken about today, but there's a few items that I wanted to touch on. So, this is, when the Dark Night occurs, it's a phase of a real deep spiritual crisis. It's often marked by a loss of meaning or an identity where all of the former aspects of ourselves can slowly just fall away. It's really just, our old patterns, our egoic self structures that fall apart can really entail a period of fear, despair, high levels of confusion. It's known in both the ancient mysticism, esoteric traditions, as well as modern psychology. It often precedes a growth or transformation. And what I call is that, just from my own experiences, is that it's really a reorganization or a reorientation where we're just picked up in a path that we're going and we're brought in another direction that can be somewhat of a kicking and screaming experience because we don't often have a full awareness of where it is that we're going. So if you're anything like me, sometimes you're going kicking and screaming. So that's the reorganization, and it's often triggered by awakenings or trauma or insight. And it's really, I think the main takeaway is that it's a test of faith. You know, sometimes it's easy to keep our faith when everything's great and going fabulously, but when we're in the midst of a dark night and there's nothing really to hold on to, but our faith can be somewhat of a challenge. So I just wanted to mention, because it's really interesting for me, is that the Dark Night has appeared in ancient wisdom all the way through, Egyptian sun god Ra's journey through the underworld. It was in the Neoplatonic texts. It was in Dante's Inferno, which is really just a metaphor for spiritual awakening as we navigate that process. It's been in popular literature with Shakespeare's Hamlet and Macbeth, and of course in St. John of the Cross's his teachings. So one of the main findings from this research in relation to confusion is that the Kundalini awakening confusion is often linked to two factors: the intensity of the dark night of the soul and just trouble integrating the awakening back into normal life. So, yeah, for people that are in a real the midst of an intense dark night and they're really having a real difficult time integrating that, they're going to be confused, and especially if there's a lack of spiritual practice that has shown to be making it worse. And some of the quotes from participants were along the lines of that it was initially this disorientation of the awakening was so overwhelming that it was just not being able to find any answers anywhere. And another person had to say it had been extremely terrifying and incomprehensible to the family. And this person suggested that they were psychotic due to a lack of sleep. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that for people that have experienced this lack of sleep, it's often called turiya, which is a Sanskrit term, and that really just means the fourth state. It's pure awareness. So it's beyond, waking dream state. It's a level of consciousness where your consciousness actually doesn't shut off. I experienced this through my own Kundalini awakening, and it was very destabilizing because A, I didn't know what a Kundalini awakening was, and I didn't know what Turiya was. So when the self structure in the body kind of just fell away into sleep, and then there was this awareness that was still present, I just, didn't know what was happening, and not sleeping for days was extremely confusing. So it was just really makes sleep just almost inaccessible in a way, and it's completely altered. I was certainly grateful when it came back to regular sleep where the consciousness fell away. And then the second finding was the integration challenges. So the Kundalini Awakening integration challenges often arose when there was just confusion and intensity were so high, there was no spiritual practice present, and the support of the community was at a level of confusion and also potentially quite rigid. So that was a really interesting finding for me. And some of the quotes from participants were along the lines of, I lost most of my friendships. I had a very difficult period in 2023, and my understanding of difficulty had completely changed through this Kundalini awakening, and I can certainly attest to that. And some of the key insights were is that the intensity of the dark night mattered more than the length of it. Spiritual practice helps in regulating the energy. The community is helpful, but it can at times also be harmful. And solitude is important for the healing process. And some practical suggestions for people is to ultimately listen to your body. And if something doesn't resonate with you and your system that is so intelligent all the time, constantly communicating with you, move into a different direction or flow with the river in a different way. And some people might find this next thing I'm going to say controversial, and that's perfectly fine, is that you may need some guidance. You likely will need guidance, but in my view, you never need a master, you don't need a guru, and you don't need a spiritual leader. And that's from some of my research on cults. You need to develop a practice that works for you. Seek trauma-informed, spiritually aware support, and gratefully, there's so many of those communities and people emerging, and many of them are connected to SAI. Balance time and community as well as solitude. So just finding that perfect balance that works best for you, and be patient with your integration process because your life has changed. And when it happened to me, it really just felt like I was an infant all over again, learning how to navigate this wonderful reality that we call life. So I want to thank everyone for their attention and wish you all many blessings.
Thank you, Dr. Overall. That was amazing. And I want to thank you so much for doing your research because many of us that have had Kundalini awakenings, we don't know what's happening, and we don't even know who to talk to about them. So thank you for all of your amazing work that you're doing.
You're welcome.
And also, if you want to put your questions in the chat for Dr. Overall, and we will ask them at the end when everybody is done speaking. So our next presenters are Dr. John D. Stone, PhD, and Ronald Meyer, who will present Dissolving the Boundaries Between Us, a new approach to mystical experiences. Dr. John Stone and Ronald Meyer explore how ancient rituals in affect the Enlightenment intensive, and the Lila paradigm foster deep collective awareness. Welcome, Dr. Stone and Mr. Meyer. Glad you're here.
Good evening, everyone. It's me on the left and John Stone's on the right, and we met through martial arts 40 years ago and been on a spiritual journey together ever since. Our talk is based on the premise that the self-other distinction is detrimental to the human race and is a fundamental source of conflict, suffering, and stagnation. We propose that the self-other distinction and the boundaries between us is an illusion. It's not real. It's created through the ego. As many people who have near-death experiences report, they also know this and come back and say we are all one in some way. So we will be describing in the end a practice that dissolved these boundaries. I'm a filmmaker, and I got involved with near-death experiences when I started producing a movie on near-death experiences, and it'll be released in August. And as you can see, there's a couple of familiar names there that are experts in it. We also have 16 other near-death experiences across a wide variety of people, from ones who had them at the beginning of birth all the way until older situations. In the process of interviewing these experts, John Stone sat in with me and we created a short film called Near-Death Experiences and Mysticism. John, you want to talk about that?
Yes, when Ron told me that he was doing this, I started looking at near-death experiences, researching them on my own, and I was struck by two things that I felt were just what I had experienced in my own enlightenment experiences, and that was, first of all, the experience of unconditional love, and the other was the encounter with the divine. And some of the experiences that I read about actually brought me to tears. They were so consonant with what I'd experienced myself. So that was what we tried to bring out in our film.
So the next group of 4 slides describe at different levels or different scales the kind of conflict that results from the self-other distinction. The first is interpersonal, and you all are quite familiar with that probably when you've had conflicts with another person. So the second look is the old tribal distinction, and of course that's playing out right now in many ways in our society. It played out historically with primitive people when your neighboring tribe had to be viewed in some way as another. And of course, we have the Republican Democrat split and so many other splits like that. And then it scales up even higher to global conflict, where Americans are against the Chinese and the Russians, and within that there's also many conflicts within Africa, and pretty much everywhere you go there's conflict at the higher national level. And then finally, a more interesting situation is rising right now, and that is with the rise of the LLMs, the large language models of superintelligence. And they seem to be adopting kind of a self-other distinction. And that's a possible, and people who are developing these models are taking it into account because they got to put guardrails on these super intelligent artificial intelligences. And one of the problems may be is that they may make a self-other distinction between them and us. And since they're super intelligent, they may just say, well, let's just control them or destroy them. And so there's a lot of effort to try and figure out what's going on with regard to that distinction. And it's in the literature on people who are describing the alignment issue between us and these new powerful forms of maybe another kind of species. My own spiritual experiences, they started when I had when I was 12 years old. I had a non-dual experience where the self disappeared and there was just the world. And I've had those experiences throughout my life. They come on spontaneously. I've had out-of-body experiences of two kinds. One where my consciousness is on the outside of my body and I'm able to move my body as a result of that perspective. And then I've had at least one experience where I actually got out of my bed, out of my body in bed and walked around a building and did things and then came back and got into it. I had an experience in China where I entered what near-death experiencers describe as the room of all knowledge, and I knew everything. And I had a guide who was a Tibetan Lama. And when I got to Tibet, I was doing a filming project. There he was, and he told me I had to save Tibet, and I did so in a particular way. And the last one I had them during enlightenment intensives, and they were of what near-death experiences describe as the dark light or the void. The first one was just the void, but the second one also contained something that I would say the possibility of infinite potential. And I had those during the enlightenment experience. And John will now talk about enlightenment intensives.
Enlightenment intensives are a new development in spiritual technology. They started in the late 60s in California, naturally enough, when a man named Charles Berner noticed he was doing therapy work with people. He noticed that people who had a deeper sense of themselves, who knew who they were in a deeper sense, did better in therapy. So he thought, well, if I could get people to really know who they were, that would be a good thing. So he had this insight that if he combined the famous spiritual question, who am I, or what am I, even what is life, with this technique he was using, which he called clearing, where you continually ask the same question, like, tell me something that bothers you about me, and so on, that kind of questioning. Put those two together, and it developed into the enlightenment intensive, which usually lasts about 3 days. It can last 2 weeks or a week or anything in between. People pair off for 40-minute periods, about 12 times a day. And one person will tell the other person, tell me who you are, if that's your question. And the other person will contemplate the question for a while and then communicate whatever comes up. I'm simplifying here. And over the course of 3 days, because you're within this very carefully built container, the pressure builds up until finally there's a breakthrough if things go well. And people, about a third of the people, in my experience, have some sort of an awakening experience, not always very big, but significant. A significant change happens in the 3 days. So the process of opening up to another person and being in contact with another person is the innovation here. My own mystical experiences started in an intensive on the 4th day. I've been working very hard. We were all we slept and ate and did all of our experiences in one room for 4 days. And on the 4th day, I broke through on the question of what am I? And it was also, though I didn't know at the time, also a Kundalini awakening. My body exploded with energy as I became conscious of myself in this new way. And I started sobbing and I was shaking. It was unlike anything I'd ever experienced, and yet it was completely familiar. It was as if I'd been reunited with someone I thought was dead. And before I'd been an atheist, afterwards, the Bible made sense to me, as did the writings of the mystics in a completely new way. So it completely changed the way I saw the world.
So based on what John described as enlightenment intensives, some people have decided or figured out a way to use the same procedure to go into the we space, which we call the we space, where the boundaries between us dissolve. And go ahead. This we space concept has played an important role throughout history. And if we could actually dissolve those boundaries, we could solve a lot of human problems. Tribal, global, and of course the big one with AI. So the we space practice, John, you want to describe that, how that would go and what the instructions are?
Yeah, the we space practice developed out of the Enlightenment Intensive. A group of people got together and they tried to find a way to bring their enlightenments into the world. The integration that was spoken of in an earlier talk is a problem with enlightenment experiences. And the people who started this process wanted to bring it into the world, and they developed this practice where you sit in a group, and one person will start by saying, open to us. And then people contemplate what the spiritual connection between people in the group, and then communication will start spontaneously. Right now it's limited to people who have been through the Enlightenment Intensive, but Ron has done some experimenting with this with people who have not taken Enlightenment Intensives. Want to talk about that, Ron?
Yeah, so I've done it with relatives and friends who haven't had experience, and they all get a hit, like, and they report back like people who had near-death experiences, like, I got a communication, but I can't put it into words. I felt safe. I felt, very comfortable. Many of those things. And we did interviews promoting our movie. When we would we do it with a host at the end, and they all seem to immediately go into some state where they what we would call the we space, where that separation between us dissolves, and they have some kind of enlightenment experience, maybe even a transformational experience. Here's our contact information.
Thank you very much, guys. That's, you're doing a lot of great work to help share the wisdom of NDEs and help it make this planet a better place. So thank you so much. And everyone, remember to put your questions in the chat, and we'll ask everyone, all the speakers after. So our next speaker is Jianing Wang, who is a PhD. Did I do it right? PhD student in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction at the Education University of Hong Kong. Jianing will present her proposed study, Beyond Matter, Awakening Experiences and Parental Choices in Shadow Education, which highlights the significance of incorporating a post-materialistic view, specifically concerning the awakening experiences of mainland Chinese parents, into the field of shadow education. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm so glad to be here. So now I will share my screen. Well, before diving deeper into this project, I'd like to start by sharing my personal experience of spiritual awakening, which is relevant to this project in so many ways. So, story time first. I grew up in northeastern China. Religion and spirituality were pretty much absent from my reality for the first 25 years of my life. At one point, I found myself pursuing a master's degree at the University College London, where I graduated with distinction in December 2020. So, by most external measures, I was definitely thriving. But on the inside, I felt like I was dying. I became my own harshest critic. I started chasing perfection. I had so many questions, but I just couldn't find answers to any of them. Or perhaps the answers had been shouting at me all along in forms I couldn't yet understand. And actually, since my third year of undergraduate studies, or even long before that, my body had started breaking down. But I chose, or at least I thought I chose, to bury my suffering because I was so obsessed with achieving my goals. I didn't want to stop. I simply thought that those struggles were just a small price to pay for success. So in March 2021, I went to Shanghai to start my next mission. But after a wisdom tooth extraction in April, I developed facial eczema. Then from April 2021 to February 2022, my life became a brutal trial that tested me on every level. But in some sense, my life became quite simple. Simple enough for me to notice certain patterns more clearly. At just the perfect time, I came across a series of positive psychology courses online by Dr. Tauben Shahar. And one idea in particular broke me wide open, and that was no one is coming. And that was so true. I mean, no one was coming to save me. Not doctors, not medications, not even my family and friends. So when this truth sunk in, I felt bombarded by a storm of emotions like apology, forgiveness, love, freedom, and peace. It's just too complicated to put into words. It felt as if I was shattered to pieces, dying in every possible way. So I realized that I had to become the one to save myself. So that's when I decided to truly love myself, raise myself all over again, and commit to making real changes, no matter the cost. Nothing could be worse than what I had already experienced. I had just had enough. So I thought, okay, let me try something really different then. So in late March 2022, I stopped all medical treatments for several reasons, and I basically turned my life into a huge meditation. In other words, I was intensively resetting my thoughts, emotions, and behaviors through the moments of the here and now. And then I started to experience several positive transformations along the way. For example, the eczema had covered all over my face started to recover. And a few months later, in late October, I felt a strong impulse to further immerse myself into the flow of life. So I traveled to Dali, a very beautiful place in China, and here are some photos I took and edited. So the 3 months I spent there, especially the first two, were the most alive of my 25 years up to that point, I suppose. I just wanted to simply leave. I didn't even care about my healing anymore. And I guess that's what the magical part. By literally not caring about anything, I became incredibly fearless, patient, stable, and joyful. The world felt so close to me, and my life just flowed effortlessly, and many more positive transformations emerged. I never expected that during the most chaotic and broken times of my life, when I was losing my health, my pride, and my control over life, I would meet my wholeness. And I was also amazed by how my outer reality shifted as my inner world transformed. By the way, I submitted my PhD application there, and that's why I'm here. And I took this photo on the way to the airport as I left there, gazing at the glowing clouds and thinking, my very first life starts. But nothing special, it's still life. And the secret is life itself. I'm here to truly live and enjoy the possibilities. But this is not the end of the story, it's actually the very beginning, and integration is quite something. I have been experiencing many after effects. To me, they're overwhelmingly positive, showing a tendency towards more healthier, balanced, loving, creative, and sustainable ways of existence. And the project I'm now going to talk about is definitely part of my alignment. My spiritual awakening happened without me even knowing its name. So my original research proposal that got me enrolled in my PhD program had nothing to do with awakening. But eventually I reached the point where I had to shift my research focus to align with my inner calling. So now let's move on to this project. Shadow education refers to paid lessons in school subjects conducted outside of formal school hours and responsibilities. So now we do face the persistent fixation on shadow education investment in China, largely driven by intense competition. And this is compounded by the difficulties in addressing the complex interplay between shadow education investment and social inequality. At the same time, we're also witnessing an ongoing paradigm shift from materialism to post-materialism. So for the literature review, I will start by talking about how education and shadow education can be understood through materialism and neoliberalism. And then I will move on to post-materialism, spirituality, and awakening experiences. So the term materialism in this project refers to the dominant worldwide ideology asserting that nothing exists beyond matter, that the physical world is the only reality. It seems that this deeply ingrained belief in the physical nature of reality has fundamentally shaped people's way of living by shaping the craving for material achievements, often at the cost of non-material dimensions of life. In parallel, neoliberalism appears to exacerbate these issues by placing even greater emphasis on competition and individual responsibility, resulting in increased sense of separation among people. And within this context, shadow education has emerged and grown exponentially as a byproduct of the marketization and commodification of education. And I suppose competition is definitely one of the most important keywords in this field, and reevaluating the culture of competition appears to be crucial for achieving the fundamental change regarding the societal fixation on shadow education investment. But for competition to be possible, at least the two parties are needed, right? Like two individuals. And it's often natural for people to believe in an I that is distinct from other beings in this world. So then people will naturally label things as mine or not mine, and then prioritize personal belongings. So at its core, competition appears to reflect the boundary we draw between self and not self. Therefore, to fundamentally re-understand competition, we may need to reconsider the very concept of self. I mean, what am I, really? And I suppose most, if not all, shadow education research operates within the paradigm of materialism. And this perspective is so deeply ingrained that it often goes unchallenged or unspoken. And the exploration of how parents' life stories influence their decision-making regarding their decision-making regarding shadow education for their child has been encouraged. And some researchers have emphasized the importance of producing studies that are not only relevant to shadow education researchers, but also valuable to researchers in other fields. So we need to try something different now. Then is it possible to dissolve the boundary between self and not self, and in doing so, dissolve competition? In other words, is it possible to make this problem no longer a problem? So now let's move on to beyond matter. An emerging paradigm known as post-materialism challenges the core principles of materialism by embracing the notion that consciousness is fundamental in this universe and encouraging the exploration of spirituality-related phenomena, highlighting its potential to drive radical transformations across all levels of human society. And during experiences of expanded awareness, referred to as awakening experiences here, people often experience a dissolution of the sense of self accompanied by deep feelings of unity. In other words, the most fundamental boundary between self and no-self appears to dissolve here. And the revelation gained from awakening experiences suggests that the essence of human existence is conscious, eternal, infinite, non-judgmental, and unconditional love. Awakening to and embodying such love has been proposed as the most fundamental and transformative way for humans to shape both their inner world and the fabric of external reality. So, in an education centered on wisdom and this unconditional love, is believed to transform knowledge seekers into conscious and creative beings, reshaping a world plagued by hostility and distrust into one that is sustainable, harmonious, and grounded in interconnectedness and compassion. So this calling serves as a foundational cornerstone shaping the very essence of this study. At the moment, the understanding of spirituality related phenomena remains rather limited, particularly in the context of China. But the previous studies have shown that awakening experiences may provide valuable insights into understanding humanity and reality, with the potential to transform this kind of competitive mindset rooted in a sense of separation. Given everything mentioned, this proposed study is going to address these two research questions, like what influences did the awakening experiences have on the mainland Chinese parents and their study, and how do these influences shape their decisions regarding shadow education for their child. So this proposed study is going to be the first to combine awakening experiences with shadow education, holding promising implications for both sides or even multiple sides. And it could also provide valuable insights to inform policies related to shadow education, and social inequality, perhaps. And that's pretty much everything about this project. And here are the references. So in my journey to answer what miracle am I, I've stepped into what miracle we as humans on the deepest level. Along the way, I've been reminded to honestly answer the question, how can I truly love myself in order to love the world? And actually, I'm not doing this research at the moment because I've made many changes to my research proposal since writing this first version. And actually, my ongoing transformation has shifted not just my research topic, but also how I approach my research and everything, of course. At the end of last year, I felt called to move into a deeper state of surrender. And since then, my transformation has intensified. It feels as if everything is speeding up, even to a point where I have had to pause my knowledge seeking for a while to do some other things to truly embody and anchor unconditional love, aligning everything more closely with my inner calling, even when this rational mind cannot comprehend this. So I've been experiencing, discerning, processing, and integrating many things, and there is so much I don't know. But it's okay, I'll just keep this don't know to open up new possibilities. What I do know is that I'm always on the way, and this step must be taken before the next, since I'm already here. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you find this interesting.
Thank you so much, Jianing. You have such a beautiful story, and I'm really excited to see what the future holds for you. And you reminded me of just being okay in the question. So sometimes after we have these awakenings, we want to know everything. And I love that you remind us all just be okay in the question. So thank you so much, and I'm really excited to hear what the future holds for you. So so our final panelist is Rev Kevin Lee, who's an internationally acclaimed best-selling author, motivational speaker, and certified transformational trainer. As a metaphysical minister and mystical researcher, Kevin is going to take us in an exploration of ancient, historical, and modern examples of precipitation mediumship phenomena. Welcome, Reverend Lee. Glad you're here.
Thank you so much. You did a good job saying that word. It's not an easy word. Just think of rain. We all know precipitation. It's really the same. Well, I'll get to that in a minute. But I just want to say, first off, Thank you to SAI, to Dr. Kaysen. I always say places and spaces like this are so rare on the planet that we know that there is an existence, a reality beyond this dimension, and I don't take it for granted. And I remind audiences how precious these spaces are, because they can truly be enlightening. They can be transformative. And being a metaphysical minister, everything I do is in relation to that beyond the physical. So I just really appreciate that this space exists. I want to say that. So what I will do over the next 15 minutes, I'm going to take you through a 2.5-hour presentation quickly. We are going to go through 3,500 years of my historical research, and I will show you different aspects of spirit communication in the form of art and in the form of writing and symbolism and in faces and all kinds of interesting things you'll recognize, things you won't believe your eyes. And so what I'm going to share with you is called precipitation mediumship. And I'll start off this way by saying that the ancient word was a Greek word, echaropoeta. And then they also called it Mendelians in the Byzantine Empire. And then they also called it holy icons, which you'll hear that today in many churches and basilicas around the world. The modern term, what we use in spiritualism and in spiritism and things like that, is precipitation mediumship. So I'll go ahead and begin to share some wonderful things with you all. So please enjoy. All right, thumbs up if you can see that. Good, very nice. All right. So I like that word intentions. I heard someone say intentions instead of goals. And really my intention today is to show you proof of the continuity of life, that life after the change we call death, right? And I will do that through demonstrate that through images, writings. These were not created. Let me say that again. These were not created, what you're going to see, by human hands or by human tools. These were created through a spiritual scientific process that we term precipitation mediumship. Just to give you a little bit of background on myself so that you can trust that I know what I'm talking about. I ran a metaphysical center for many years here in South Florida, closed that during the COVID. And I'm an ordained metaphysical minister. I'm definitely certified as a spiritual medium twice over. I have participated in, hosted as well, easily over 300 seances. And that word seance, it just means a sitting with spirit. Don't let it be a strange, dark and scary word. It just means spirit in a sitting. I have participated in approximately 30 precipitation seances. I've sat in over 20 Lakota ceremonies that are full of spirit physical phenomena. I've actually known and interviewed over the years in my church system, the United Metaphysical Churches, over 12 precipitation mediums when they really don't exist anywhere in the world, which is interesting as a spiritual phenomena. And I'm one of probably 5 precipitation researchers on the planet who even speak about this phenomena, who have direct firsthand experiences. I have physically witnessed with my own eyes physical precipitation happen on spirit command right in front of my eyes. It was quite amazing. So that's just to give you a little bit of a background of where I'm coming from as a researcher. What is precipitation mediumship? Remember how I mentioned earlier, it's kind of like rain, right? Think of precipitation, humidity in the atmosphere. By definition, we can say that a precipitate is something that condenses out of a solution and falls as a deposit. Of course, we have rain. We also have snow. We also have ash. There's ice, in a way, is a type of precipitate. I've got many stories about ice forming into faces and initials and things like that. Well, a precipitation medium is someone who's actually able to work with the etheric helpers or spiritual guides to produce this physical phenomena that can physically be seen. You can take it home with you, things like that. In the process, we call that process of formation scientifically precipitation, because the phenomena literally precipitates out of the ethers onto the canvas that's supplied by the medium. Physical mediumship, if you're not aware of what that word means, it simply means it's when spirit intelligences can manipulate the energies and the substances or the life force of the medium, and it causes a physical effect in our dimension, right? It could be voices, it could be smells, it could be light, it could be a lot of different things, forms and things like that. Healing, communication is really the purpose of all of that. Now, about 3,500 years ago, a man went to the top of a mountain and came down with these tablets, supposedly the 10 Commandments. And I find it very interesting because this is a form of materialization, if you will. It's spirit writing. Because of my research, because I have witnessed pigment extracted from attendees' clothing, which damaged the clothing, unfortunately, I can imagine Moses on the top of that mountain wearing his vegetable and flower pigmented robes, and spirit producing these writings by dematerializing that pigment from the robes and placing that upon some type of either maybe a stone tablets, clay tablets, whatever they might have been. I can see that happening. Also, you can see that image at the bottom there where it looks like a king and there's a hand writing on the wall. Well, that's the writing is on the wall, right? This was from the city of Babylon, and Spirit actually wrote on the wall in this strange and foreign tongue, predicting the king's death and the fall of his empire in 24 hours, right? And so that's a beautiful example, again, of spirit writing. There's an intelligence there that is communicating to the viewers, if you will, and there had to have been precipitation, because where did the ink come from? Well, it probably came from flowers or vegetables and fruits and things like that, maybe even from all the curtains and tapestry inside of a king's temple, if you think about it. So again, I can just imagine spirit utilizing what it needed to create the images to create the writings in that historical event. This one is quite interesting, right? So the Shroud of Turin, many of us know about this. And what I find interesting is that there's an imprint of a face or a body in this, and it's just absolutely beautiful. I can imagine the process of precipitation taking place. This is another incredibly famous artifact, an icon, a holy icon, the Vera Icona, or they call the Veil of Veronica. And this is housed in Italy. And what's interesting is that scientists have not been able to find paints or dyes when they do research with microscope on this artifact. The same thing actually occurred with this artifact. This is a 500-year-old piece. It should not exist today because it actually materialized or precipitated onto, I can't think of the word, but basically it was a type of trying to think of the word. It escapes me, but it basically was like a tilma. It was a cactus fiber. That's the word I'm looking for. An agave cactus fiber cloth that a pilgrim was wearing. And so it should have disintegrated in 10 to 20 years. That's interesting, right? So it still exists 500 years later. Also, science has not been able to determine what exactly the pigment is that makes the blue in Our Lady of Guadalupe's robe. It does not exist on the periodic table. Right? So precipitation, how can this be a form of spirit communication? How can someone, a consciousness from the afterlife, communicate with us, and how does it really prove it? Well, that's a question that I thought about for quite some time. And what I came to understand was that there is an intelligence behind this phenomena that's taking place. The precipitated matter or material is intelligently, that's key, intelligently rearranged and reformed. It is originally dematerialized. I actually supply the pigments for spirit to use. They dematerialize them, then they rematerialize them in a totally different form and it is in a very intelligent form. These precipitations prove a sense of continuity of life, right? They can also be very synchronistic to someone's life, the things that are happening in their life, even though the spirit person, the departed, that we may be communicating with, maybe they passed away a long, long time ago and they don't know, they've never met our children or they never met our current pets. There is still synchronicity. I have seen it in the phenomena where spirit is speaking about changes that have happened since they died in the family, right? And so this precipitation can also be very evidential to the recipient in some way. It doesn't have to be, but it certainly can be, and it's definitely helpful. Also, in looking at all of these artifacts, the pictures I've taken, the artifacts I've been given, the artifacts I've received, the things that I've witnessed, it's interesting that there seems to be this three-part interrelated aspect of spirit intelligence that focuses for the recipients of the phenomena, religious aspects. There's a philosophical lifestyle, and then there's also scientific creativity, I'll call it, that I've noticed. And so there's purposeful communication, right? It could be through evidence or answers that come forward in the precipitation. It could be guiding influence in earthly life matters. Also spiritual upliftment, that's very common. You'll see some examples of that. And the spiritual upliftment really focuses on helping the spiritual body, right? The soul, the spirit. The physical healing can take place. It's more on an emotional body level, but we do know scientifically that when the emotional body begins to be healed, the physical body secondarily begins to be healed as well. The precipitation will also bring forward reminders and support. There's definitely humor. Spirit has definitely poked at me and made fun of me in the precipitation. And I've also seen experimentation and creativity by spirit control, by spirit mind. Now, what types are there? Well, there's actually 5 different types. We could say there's even a 6th type because and I'll throw this out there, but I'm not going to show an example. Some call it breath mediumship or vapor mediumship, where people are either breathing into the atmosphere, a very cold atmosphere, and what happens? Our hot air precipitates into a cloud, doesn't it? Right? And so the same with vapor mediumship, where people are sitting with intention to make contact, and spirit faces and forms begin to form in the vapors or the steam or the mist that they're generating in their maybe their little laboratory or in their spirit circle, things like that. So I've seen some really interesting forms of vapor mediumship, we'll call it. But specifically, what I'm going to show you, these are things that are incredibly physical. You're going to see them. Slate writing, right? Think about in the 1800s when children had slate boards to write with, right? Chalk and slate. You're going to see spirit flame messages. You're also going to see silk precipitation. It's called silk precipitation because that's the canvas that it is produced upon. Right. Also, there is spirit card writing. Again, it's the canvas it's precipitated on, which is these index cards. You'll see those, and precipitated art, portrait art. You're going to see forms of that as well. These are back in the 1800s when spiritualism really came to the highlight as a world religion. You started seeing people sitting with chalk and slate, and these various mediums that you can see listed on the screen were definitely the most famous in our history to produce this type of phenomena. You can see how extensive the writing is, the imagery, the incredible messages of love and support that come through. I want you to know that this was occurring at a time, especially these full colored images, these were occurring at a time when pen and ink and paper was very expensive. It was quite limited to the wealthy and to government institutions or academic institutions. And so school slates were a better medium, if you will, for spirit communication, spirit writing. It was definitely cheap and available. So these are some great examples of that. Beng's sisters precipitated portraitures. These are pretty amazing. They exist at Camp Chesterfield in Indiana. And these are very large paintings, and these were fully precipitated, several of them in front of audiences of hundreds, in windows of buildings and auditoriums. The sun would pour through the canvases, and the two Bang sisters would actually place a hand upon each side of the canvas, and spirit would begin to precipitate as though a black cloud were moving on the canvas. And then these forms, these portraits would begin to materialize. Quite stunning. And they would change over time. I'll mention that. I'll show you another example of that. This is an example of the Campbell brothers precipitated portraitures, which you can see at Lilydale Spiritualist Assembly, south of Buffalo, New York. And these two images are quite large, quite famous. And the Campbell brothers were actually a gay couple at a time when it was not acceptable, definitely illegal to be a gay. And so they just called themselves the brothers, but they were more than that. And this painting on the left I find fascinating because it's 40 inches by 60 inches. It is huge. The colors are spectacular. The painting on the right of Abraham Lincoln, also quite large, 3 to 4 feet in size. And also what's interesting is that in 1941, Eastman Kodak did research on Abraham Lincoln's precipitated picture, and they were not able to identify what the paint medium was. This is the last known precipitation portraiture medium, and she's from Golden Gate Spiritualist Church in San Francisco. You can still see her works there. These are just a few of the many paintings on display, and these were produced during a 2-hour sitting. So it took quite a while for Spirit to produce these, and they could be seen once they were produced, and then they were covered for a few months and allowed to, I'm going to say, set onto the canvas, because if light touched them, they would fade very quickly. In a matter of days or hours, they would disappear. Now, remember how I said a spirit will write things of support and encouragement. And what I love about this is a very famous paranormal example of another gay couple out in Los Angeles, California. And they bought a home and started taking pictures, as every couple does. And one of them noticed that there were these strange amorphous blobs of white and what looked like letters and numbers forming that eventually began forming in these Polaroid films in a matter of, I think, months, a very short period of time, into faces and into these writings. And so what I love is on the right, it says, anything is possible, right? How beautiful is that? On the left, it says, open your mind and you will open your heart. And this is just a beautiful example of precipitation, because inside the Polaroid are chemicals and minerals of the earth. You've got silver, you have potassium, you've got a lot of other minerals and elements. So I find it interesting that they precipitate in this way. This is an example of ash precipitation, where the medium there is holding a little index card over a candle flame, and she is collecting or allowing the soot to build on the card, and she's just moving it as she's inspired to move it, and these faces begin to come forward, and then she delivers a message to the recipient in the audience. What is interesting is that these precipitations will change over time, because this image did not have facial hair scratches when the person received it, and the next day when they were looking at it again, the scratches had appeared in the soot. So these precipitations will change over time. This is an example of silk precipitation, and you can see here these beautiful, incredibly vibrant colors appearing on the faces, and truly remarkable on the silks. This is an example of the professional level of really what I received. My very first time I received a card as a gift, and it's the image of Mother Mary and Father Joseph. It truly changed my life. And I was blown away by the transformation. Don't have time for that story, but it really began my journey into what the heck is this, and how did that old man do that for me and change my life? Truly remarkable. You can see these are two sides of the same card, a beautiful image. Another example of the spirit writing. There's names, there's encouragement, there's pictures, more writings, truly remarkable. And probably one of the last ones that I'll show you is this image. This image, this spirit card on the left, did not exist in the physical reality. The daughter who you see there, who died as a teenager, her mother had asked for a picture of her on a spirit card at the next seance. She broke down, couldn't get there, but when she got there, she received the card, and her mother realized the picture only existed in photonic and electronic form inside her computer. She had never printed it, and her daughter did that for her. So just an amazing example of mysticism and spiritual art, and just this incredibly rare, truly nearly forgotten aspect of spirit, the continuity of life, the intelligence of the afterlife, and how incredibly involved and in the moment they are right now. They are listening to me. They're watching this conference. And I'm sure they're celebrating the good things that we're doing. So I really just want to just thank you for this opportunity to share just a little bit about some of the research that has changed my life, the experiences that I've had. It is an incredible reality. And if you're interested in the phenomena of precipitation mediumship, just Google that word and you will find my website. And I do have a group where I train students in Facebook. And it has marvelous examples of the students developing their own precipitation. I'm so proud of them.
Wow, Kevin, that's amazing.
It's real.
Yeah, it's very cool what you're doing.
Thank you.
That is just I'd literally never heard of that, which is why I
Yes.
couldn't pronounce it.
Welcome to my world.
Oh, I'm familiar with mediumship, but not that. Like, wow, that's amazing. Yeah. So thank you. So, if you get a chance, if you could put a link to your slides in the chat, I think a lot of people would like that.
Sure,
wow.
sure.
So everyone, put your questions in the chat for the speakers. And while you're doing that, wow, I just got to say to all of you again, this was very enlightening. Wonderful. So let's start off with, while people are putting questions in the chat, for Dr. Overall, what are the causes of like a spontaneous spiritual or Kundalini awakening? Like, what causes them when you're not trying to do anything and it just happens, would you say, in your research?
Well, from my personal experience, a smoothie was the catalyst for mine on a patio in Toronto. So I would say, anecdotally, from my own ethnographic experience, I would say that it's random. Like, if you're not seeking anything, then, these things just can spontaneously happen. If you're, on a retreat and you have an intention to have a particular peak experience or something to that effect, you may get what you wanted. For me, I had a smoothie and I wasn't expecting to have the experience that I did. I had no idea what it was. So if it's a spontaneous awakening, I think just the word itself, spontaneous, also indicates randomness. We might not know what is the script, beyond this reality, and if it was all supposed to happen at that moment in that place, which obviously it was, then there's something more at play. But yeah, I would definitely say random.
That's awesome. So smoothie. Very cool. Dr. John and Ron, so you talk about separation and the other. So what does your research show about NDEers and their reporting a state of oneness? And I'll ask two. And also, what role do your subjects say that duality, we're talking about duality, what does that play in this world versus the other side?
John, do you want to talk about that?
Well, I can say personally, in my spiritual experiences, the self and other disappears completely in the experience. The difficulty is bringing that back into everyday life, where suddenly there is often you go into this other way of seeing the world, which feels more real than regular reality, which is also something NDE people talk about. But then you come out of that again and come back into the ordinary reality, and then the self is often still there, and then you experience self another. And so the problem is integrating that sense of dissolution into this relative realm. That is the challenge of it all. And that's one of the things that the we space meditation is designed to dissolve and to make it so that you can have that sense of unity while you're out in the crowd, say.
Yeah, you can reflect back to somebody when you're talking to them that you get the spiritual being that they are in fact, and that kind of opens them up. I play with that quite a bit, and it seems to be pretty effective. I recently had an experience with a doctor I was seeing who was reflected back to him, and all of a sudden he somehow said, "I need a hug," and he asked me to pray for him, which is pretty odd for your doctor to do that. So it can trigger things in other people. When you get a taste of that experience, it can reflect it to other people.
Yeah, when you let the other person see that you see them as they are, and they get that, that's when the self other divide tends to dissolve.
Great, thank you. Jianing, your story is so inspiring.
Thank
And
you.
So can you explain a little bit about, what roles do you see health issues in playing in spiritual awakening? Because you talked about your your health issues. And do you find that those might play a part in spiritual awakening?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I
So
didn't
you
get
talked
that.
about your health issues that you were having.
Health
Yeah.
issues.
Do you think that your health issues contributed to your spiritual awakening?
I think definitely yes. I think it's just a signal for me to truly stop and reflect on myself. And it's just it was time for me to stop. Otherwise, I think I wouldn't, leave after that. So, and I really appreciate those health issues in some sense because they kind of gave me an unexpected pause where I can truly understand myself, to learn how to love myself, and to learn how to rebuild my whole life. So I think those health issues contribute a lot to my spiritual awakening. It's definitely part of the process of this awakening unfolding, I guess.
Yeah, they certainly seem humbling, don't they? Bring us to our knees. So Reverend Kevin, so everybody loves your talk, and so it brought up actually some people were talking about Sonia Rinaldi, who was actually my speaker last month in my group, and so she does instrumental trance communication. You know her, right?
Yes.
So how do you explain? So what's the biggest difference between instrumental trance communication and precipitation mediumship?
That's a great question. Nobody's ever asked that, but I know the answer. Thank you, Sean. It's interesting. ITC is literally that. It's a communication happening between instruments. And so Sonia's work is specifically, she's a very dear friend of mine, and I've seen her presentations. I get standing ovations. And her research is instrument based, but it's science and it's spirituality. It's a form of mediumship and it's research. It's truly, her work is pioneering. I happily say that. And the difference is she's using technology to make spirit contact, and I am using literally just pigments. I use paints. I use pens, inks, chalks, flowers can be even used. Vegetable peels can be used. Anything with pigments. and because spirit will take that and then reform it. So there's no instruments used other than the pigments that I supply and the canvas or the index cards or the silk that I use for them to precipitate onto as a canvas.
Very, very helpful. Yeah. And so also somebody would like to know, what's the difference? So is communicating with one's own spirit guides considered mediumship? And maybe you could explain the difference between maybe mediumship and connecting with guides and all that. Is there a difference?
Mm-hmm. Well, it actually is. If you're communicating with spiritual intelligence, right, a spirit personality, that is mediumship. When we are communicating with saints and masters, if you're Catholic and you prayed to saints, you're participating in a form of mediumship. You are hoping that they intercede, that they interact, communicate, they heal you, their presence is with you. That is mediumship. And so when we call upon our guides and our teachers, our masters, and our loved ones who've crossed over, it is a form of spirit communication. That is mediumship. And so there is a connection between you and spirit. But really the key is, are you just telling someone about the energy of the home, that you can feel what transpired in the home emotionally? Well, that's psychic, right? Because the house doesn't have a soul. So there's no mind or intelligence to the home. And so when you're communicating with a being with a soul or a personality, you're communicating with intelligence. So there's spirit communication. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so here's one more that, it seems like people really always want to know this. How do you know you're connecting with somebody of the light versus the dark side?
How
do you
that question, I love it. You know why I love it? Because I'm a minister and I read my Bible. So it's funny. In all honesty, I say this respectfully: by their fruits, they will be known. And so all of us who have had, I have not had a near-death experience. However, I have done my research and I've read the stories. And so in the same with near-death experiences, how do you know that the beings you're in communication with are of the light or of a lesser light, we shall say? And it's really about, how do they make you feel? What are they saying and communicating to you? How are they making your life better? Are they bringing positivity and transformation? Or are they causing you to second guess yourself, causing you to isolate yourself, causing you to abandon your dreams and the things that bring joy and love into your life? And the fruits will literally tell you, are they rotten fruits or are they good fruits? Are they helping you or harming you? And so there's your answer. And so, it's not just one time, here's my answer, a positive or negative, good or bad spirit. It's about, as I make communication regularly, what are the signs and symptoms of the communication, of the experience? How do they leave me feeling, right? And so that's my indicator, my compass when I work with spirit.
So it's always about how you feel.
Absolutely.
If you feel good, you're connecting with the light. If you don't feel good, you're connecting with the dark.
Yep.